What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today I wanted to talk about my pick of the season, Moonstone. I think that this card is looking really cool for a bunch of different reasons, one of which is going to be the focus of this video, but I also just think it's cool because with Quinjet and Victoria Hand, two really powerful ongoing abilities that people are already playing right now, this card kind of slots right in, and it's also a 4-cost card, which means it's very good in Arishem decks. So even just in Arishem decks to copy your Quinjet, I think that there is some potential there, but the potential that I want to talk about in today's video is actually going to be in Cerebro 6, which, okay, seems a little bit crazy. There's not even that many 6-power cards in Marvel Snap, at least initially. I think that maybe people don't realize how many cards can potentially have 6 power. I think that a lot of these cards, well, not a lot of these cards, but a few of these cards are reasonable options in Cerebro 6. I don't want to oversell it here. I just want to say this is something that I'm excited about, and I don't know how many other people are really talking about it. But Maximus as a 2/6, you want to play this on the final turn, of course, to then get like a 2/10 or something, which is pretty incredible value. We also have, I'm just going to go through the 6-power cards in order, and then we're going to take a look at some sleeper 6s that I mentioned. High Evolutionary has a 6-cost card inside of it. It also, the Thing is also I might say 6-cost cards, I mean 6-power cards. So the Thing can be a 6-power card that doesn't scale itself up. That's one of the things that you have to watch out for, because anything like Beta Ray Bill or Gwenpool just isn't going to work in Cerebro 6 because they pump up themselves or other cards. That means that they're just not going to work. But High Evolutionary is just a 4/6, and the Thing is just a 4/6 that can also give you some additional power by shrinking some of your opponent's stuff. But honestly, I think it is unfortunately just too expensive to be playing these cards, so I don't really think that they're real. Iron Lad is a really interesting one because I think that Iron Lad is very good. An Iron Lad that is able to copy a Cerebro, and then you're able to play another Cerebro and Mystique on turn 5, and then copy those with Moonstone. That is definitely like extreme high roll potential that Cerebro 6 has that other Cerebro decks just don't have access to. Could possibly be just making these full screen. That's probably a cleaner way to look at these as I'm discussing them. I do think that Iron Lad has to be a little bit careful because you might put some of the other cards in the deck that I'm about to discuss that might make Iron Lad a little bit of an awkward pick, but Malekith, I think, is a really cool one. It does have some similar overlaps as Iron Lad, but one good thing that both of these cards have in common is that you are building a deck around one card. Not Moonstone, unfortunately, but Cerebro. And Malekith and Iron Lad both serve to give you sort of a smaller deck, especially if you are playing Iron Lad on the final turn of the game alongside a Maximus trying to dig for that Cerebro. These are just going to give you more chances to find Cerebro and find some crazy high roll moments. So I do like both Iron Lad and Malekith. I don't own Malekith. That's part of why I'm making this video. I want to see some cool Cerebro 6 plays from y'all out there. Spider-Man Miles Morales is really enticing because it is a 1/6. That's not going to be true of anything else on the list that we're talking about today. So it could be worth it to play some cards that are moving some things around specifically to enable Miles Morales. And I'm going to touch on a few options. It doesn't look like we have any here, but we do indeed have some coming. Namor, same thing, can't really play it. Nick Fury, not worth it. Same thing with White Queen. Okay, maybe Annihilus. Oh wait, what if you Cerebro your Galactus and then you get a big Galactus? All right, that's definitely silly, but it would be funny to play both Nimrod and then like start off, go Cerebro, then Mystique, then Moonstone, then Nimrod, and then just play Galactus. And Galactus will be able to activate because it will have the additional power from the Cerebro and Mystique and Moonstone. All of that power will then go away, but you will then sort of get that power back with the Nimrod. So that's kind of silly, kind of cute. Not really what I'm going to focus on. I think that most of the other cards here are too expensive, but I could see playing War Machine just as like a big, sort of like a Jeff, allowing you to just access other locations. But I think that the curve is probably too high already with both Iron Lad, Malekith, and then Moonstone, another 4/6 in the deck. We don't want too many 4/6s, I don't think. Spectrum is a nombo because it's going to pump up your Moonstone when you have it. So you don't want that, and it'll be awkward as like a hit off Iron Lad and something like that. So those ones we want to avoid. Annihilus could actually see some use because of one of the cards we're about to talk about. The first not so hidden 6-power card is going to be the Demon from the Hood, which is also technically a 1/6. I said Miles was the only one, though you do have to spend a total of 2 energy for both the Hood and the Demon. I think that this is a fairly obvious include. Most people probably thought of this one. There is one other card that makes a Demon, and that is Nico Minoru, which also has the benefit of... Oh, I went the wrong way. Yeah, it's the first spell. But this can have the benefit of turning the Hood into a Demon, and then you have 2 pretty cheap 6-power cards. So I think that Nico is the next most obvious inclusion in the deck. It does also have a few other good modes. I mean, drawing cards, giving you a smaller deck for a combo deck, always good. Moving cards, typically the worst mode on Nico. In this deck, that is not the case because this can enable a cheap Miles Morales, which I think might just be enough to warrant Miles's inclusion into the deck. The +2 power mode is probably going to be the least used mode, but can be used on the Demon or either of Cerebro or Mystique, or potentially some other random cards you could wind up throwing in the deck. We'll talk more about those in a moment. But I mean, you just don't want to use this on any of your 6-power cards. That's what I meant to say. And replacing a location is also always great in a Cerebro deck because there's some locations that mess with powers and you'll need to get rid of them, and getting a copy of a card. The only mode that you probably don't really care for is double this card's power. I can think of some locations where this can work, but generally it's going to be something you'll want to avoid. If you can play your Nico to a location where it will get 2 more power, then double 2 up to 4 plus 2 equals 6, and you've done some nice math to give you a cool Cerebro card. But this is just a really cool play to double up on your Cerebro and get even more value there. So I do think that Nico is a worthwhile inclusion for sure. All of the spells, well, most of the spells are pretty good. And on this topic, I'm going to kind of spoil some of the cards that we're going to see coming up here from this screen, but Carnage might not initially look like a 6-power card. However, it's a way to clean up the Hood and potentially like a monster for Monster Island in some crazy scenarios, or just other locations that generate cards like X Mansion or something, right? And then it gives you a 6-power card if you destroy exactly 2 things. So yeah, it could potentially be a 6-power card. I think that this one might be a little bit on the sillier side, but honestly, just as a way, even if it's a 2/4 and it blows up the Hood, it's effectively like a 2/7. And it doesn't always have to get the Cerebro buff, but there might be other things in this deck that you're willing to destroy, because there's a lot of things that like might be 6 power sometimes, but if the curve doesn't line up well for you to make them 6 power cards, then you could just feed them to Carnage. So that's always an option. One such option is Dagger. It could just be Carnage food, or it could potentially, I think Dagger is like the riskiest of the cards that we're going to look at in this video, but when it moves to a new location, it gets +3 power for each enemy card there. So if there's exactly 2 enemy cards there, we've got another 2/6, and this might require more ways to move it than just what we're looking at here. You'd probably want to include something like a Iron Fist or a Ghost Spider, but including Dagger and including those cards definitely allows you to play a cheap Miles Morales, which is really the goal with all of that. It might seem a little bit silly, but yeah, you'd be playing all of those things to sort of feed into each other. So that way you don't just have Nico as your only move card, though there's some other move cards below. You'll see them in just a second. Next, we are going to talk about Fina, which has +3 power if you played exactly 2 cards each turn. So just play it on turn 5 with 1 other card, and then on the final turn play 2 cards, and that can definitely work. Or again, it's Carnage food, which is, you know, whatever. But just another option to think about, something that can add up to 6. And something else that can add up to 6 is Dazzler. I think that Dazzler probably wants to sit on the sidelines, but it does interestingly have some fun synergy with Carnage, where you can kind of confuse your opponent by showing them an early Dazzler, looking to fill a location, and then Carnage and chow down on one of your locations. The important thing here is if you fill all of your locations, your Dazzler will have 8 power, making it too big. So just make sure you only fill 2 of them, and you'll have a 6 power Dazzler, which seems cool. This is a straightforward run. Star-Lord, if you can hit with it, then it's 6 power. If not, Carnage food. Angela is very straightforward, actually. Instead of, a lot of decks try to get a lot of extra value out of Angela by playing move cards into the location or Kitty Pryde. This deck is not trying to do that. You are trying to play Angela, and then you are trying to play 3 other cards at that location, and that will give you a 2/6. And yeah, that seems pretty sweet. I think that Angela is a card that a lot of people will write off because you're used to thinking of like other synergies with her, but instead of doing all of that, just play exactly 3 additional cards into your Angela location, and you're set up for some Cerebro success. Here's a tricky one. Penny Parker is a 2/3 that attaches a 3/3 to itself, giving you a 6 power card. You do have to be a little bit careful that your spider is not attaching to anything else in that location, but generally you play Penny on turn 2, then on turn 3 you play the spider, attach it. I think that, so the Penny curve will not really facilitate anything super crazy as far as I'm concerned, because there's not really any 5-cost cards that you're looking to play at 6 power. I mean, maybe, I will say, this is another thing to potentially consider. You could destroy a Nimrod with a Carnage, which is cool. I did want to talk about that synergy as well. But with Penny Parker, there's not, like, the main thing that you're looking to play on turn 4 then is just a Cerebro and a Mystique. But then on turn 5, you'll have 5 energy again. So the main reason to play Penny Parker, though, is then you get to move it, and that will reduce the cost of Miles Morales. And I think that seems silly, but I think that that would actually be enough if you played Penny Parker, Rocket and Groot, which we'll get to in just a moment, and Nico. I think that that would be enough to satisfy Spider-Man Miles Morales. Now, do you want to play all of those? You are going to want to make some room for Iron Lad, Malekith, and Moonstone, as well as Cerebro and Mystique, but I just think it's cool that there are actually a few different cards that can satisfy this deck in multiple ways. Cassandra Nova is you know what, let's talk about Rocket and Groot first. So Rocket and Groot, similar thing to Angela, except I think it's riskier because there's a lot of ways you're putting it all in your opponent's court. You almost have to play like a reverse Rocketing Groot sometimes to make sure that it doesn't get too big. Typically, Rocketing Groots don't get super out of hand, and if your opponent has a loot cage, it just doesn't work anyways. But sometimes it'll work and be a 3/6, and other times it will allow you to play a cheap Miles Morales. I think this card isn't really great for a few different reasons, and I probably wouldn't play it in the deck. But one card I would actually consider is Cassandra Nova, which people are used to being like a very big card, much bigger than a 3/6. However, if you played on turn 3, your opponent has drawn 3 cards in their opening hand and then drawn 3 cards, 1 card each turn, meaning they have 6 cards left in their deck. So Cassandra on turn 3 is just a 3/6. There are going to be some awkward moments there, of course. There's going to be weird locations. And there's also the issue of what if your opponent is playing Arishem. I think that that's actually the upside of this card, is that sometimes your opponent will be playing Arishem and you can just blow them out in a location with a huge Cassandra, and then you're trying to win one of the other locations. Maybe you're actually abandoning the rest of your deck and you're trying to build as big of Athena and Angela and Carnage as you can, and Dazzler. You go all in on those on one location, and then on the final turn you drop Cassandra and Cosmo in another location to secure that. So I think that that has like weird upside that is actually pretty interesting for Cassandra Nova. I guess just like thinking of it now, Galacta, I think it would be too confusing of a deck building puzzle, but I'm just looking at how many cards have 3 power, and we're planning on giving them exactly +3. If you include Fina and Dagger into that, which Dagger I wouldn't, but Fina, Angela, Rocket, Penny, and Cosmo all natively have 3 power, and then you can also get around Galacta by throwing some of the buffs onto either Cerebro or Mystique. So maybe Galacta isn't actually something you should totally write off, but I don't think it's that great. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up here, and why I have Cosmo in the deck, of course, when Moonstone first drops, there's going to be a lot of haters out there playing Enchantress. So you're definitely going to just need Cosmo in general, but I also think that Cosmo is just good in the deck. Having something else to copy with your Mystique is really good, because you can, on the final turn of the game, go Mystique plus Cosmo and shut down your opponent from playing ongoing cards in 2 different locations, which can be a very powerful maneuver. The other thing that I wanted to bring up with having Cosmo here, and I guess there is one other thing that I will look at, I don't think that there's really, for this deck specifically, great ongoing cards that you can play alongside Moonstone to get additional value out of it. I think the biggest one is Mr. Fantastic, but Punisher, Speed, these are also like sometimes 3/6s, but I think they're just too inconsistent to get it done. What else could you use? You could use Ravonna, which, like, okay, these 2 cards and Cassandra could be made a little bit cheaper with Ravonna, but Cassandra off curve won't really work. But then Cerebro and Mystique do work with Ravonna. So this could be a cool card with Moonstone. Most of the other stuff does not really work with Moonstone, though, for this deck specifically. I guess, yeah, US Agent is fine. It works. It's a little bit awkward because you wind up shrinking your Moonstone, and then maybe at that point you're looking to play Nick Cage or something. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about just with Cosmo in general, and I'm kind of hinting at it here with Ravonna and US Agent, so with Cerebro 2 or Cerebro 3, those were always huge deck building constraints, because you couldn't, in Cerebro 2, you couldn't have any cards in the deck that had 3 or more power other than Blue Marvel. And in Cerebro 3, same thing, you get a little bit more flexibility, but Cerebro 3 sometimes played some 2 power cards. Cerebro 2 sometimes had to play some 0 power and negative power cards like Iron Man and Hobgoblin just to be able to put out enough power. But this deck is not nearly as restrictive. You can play whatever the heck you want. You could play Shang-Chi. You can still put in this deck whatever else you think is interesting. And I think that that makes it a lot more flexible than a lot of other Cerebro decks we've seen in the past, and I think that makes it pretty cool. That's gonna be it for me today. Thank you guys very much for watching. Let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if you are excited to play Cerebro 6. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.